We hate
Well,
to
have
see
they
you
gotten me a cabin? I
go.
wanna
We
pull
hate
up the
to see you go. We hope to...
That's it, Sally. Fine.
Oh, I mean, really, they were nasty.
Oh, I see.
And you know, I just wrote a column. I'm a columnist now. I have become a columnist.
You've become a columnist?
The world of people is a world of words. Words to tell people where we have been and where we are going. Words to express our feelings and sometimes to conceal them. Verbal communication is, it would seem, the most distinctive of human achievements. But a world without words, is it devoid of human messages? Or does the communicative act continue, even in silence? Scientists from several fields are now studying how feelings and intentions are conveyed through facial expression and gesture, how people use space to say something about themselves and their relationship to others, how we use nonverbal cues to make decisions about other people.
Have a good time.
In this film, we shall explore discoveries about how we talk to each other non-verbally. We shall examine the variety of non-verbal messages that pass between people, try to make clear the uses of such non-verbal communication, and finally, speculate on the origin of this language without words. In any catalog of nonverbal devices, the human face must be given high priority. It counts among our most expressive tools. Such communication need not be intentional. The face may directly mirror anxiety or exhilaration without any deliberate decision on our part. But just how accurately can we read the emotions in a human face? And how do we know it is the face that expresses these emotions, and not our knowledge of how people feel in a given context? In a technique devised by Buck, a subject looks at a television screen which shows only the face of another person. The person shown on the screen is exposed to a series of highly diverse scenes, some pleasant, some tragic. To what extent do her facial expressions mirror the scene? The first subject is asked to judge the emotion based only on the televised facial expression. Females prove better at the task than males. And physiological measures showed that poker-faced people give the strongest physiological response, while people with expressive faces showed less internal response. It seems we can express our emotions either within ourselves or by projecting them in the face. Another nonverbal device is the use of space. If we look carefully at this scene, we will see there is a pattern to what is happening. People don't place themselves randomly, but space themselves at given distances. If we intrude on an individual's personal space, he is likely to make an adjustment. Anthropologist Edward Hall has found that definite distances are maintained between people for different purposes. But these distances differ from culture to culture, as he explains to our film director, who comes from Romania.
Yeah, this is the study of proxemics, which is a study of interpersonal distances in human beings. And the distance which we are using now, incidentally, Mr. Fromm, is the distance which you set. I didn't. You put yourself out there, and this distance is a respect distance, as I understand it, in Romania. Now, what I'm going to do is to change the distance to one which is more comfortable for me talking in an interpersonal situation. Because, I mean, that other one is what I would call almost an official kind of distance, which we don't use in interpersonal conversations. And then what I would like you to do is to illustrate, if you will, pretend that I am a friend, you see, in Romania, and that I am a Romanian, and we will use a Romanian distance.
And that you are a friend of mine.
Yes, I'm a friend of yours.
I'll come closer to you and I'll try to stand as comfortable as possible without taking...
Among the culturally defined distances Hall has described are intimate distance, in which the sound, smell, and feel of the other person signals involvement with another body. Personal distance, the protective sphere which the individual maintains between himself and others. And social distance, the distance people assume in impersonal conversation.
Okay, well, you see, what's happened is we've had three distances here with three in different situations. This is a little close for the average American. I feel comfortable with it because I've used this distance or had people use this distance so many times, but it would be a little close for the average American would be. So if you notice, if you use that distance, some of them may be backing up to somewhere around like that.
Actually, I feel more comfortable now because then the eye contact was...
Hoot and Cohen have shown in an experiment that observers can directly infer the degree of status difference between people by the manner in which physical distance is used. Maximum deference.
I'd like to go over this report with you.
Intermediate deference.
I'd like to go over this report with you.
Okay. Come in.
Most informal.
I'd like to go over this report with you.
Okay. Yeah, okay, well, we were talking about eye behavior at personal distances, Harry. Now, what I would like to know is how important is it for me to be looking at you or you to be looking at me when we are talking to each other? I mean, these are for close friends.
You are not
For instance,
with me.
if I do like this, which a normal American might do when he's talking to someone, because our behavior is not to look at someone.
Then I
in the eye.
would probably come closer.
I see.
Or I would...
Eye contact with another person constitutes an important nonverbal signal and creates a feeling of emotional linkage between people. Michael Argyle of Oxford University proposed that in order to maintain a stable level of intimacy, there is less eye contact between people as they come physically closer, more as they move apart.
And it was indeed the first experiment we did on gaze to see whether people would look more at each other at greater distances on the theory that they would need to retain the same sort of intimacy, so one signal would compensate for another.
In one experiment, Argyle displayed a photograph of a person whose eyes were opened and measured the distance people assumed when looking at it. In a second condition, the experimenter used a photograph of the same person, but with his eyes closed. True to Argyle's theory, people stood closer to the second photograph.
I think the main exceptions to the equilibrium theory are firstly to do with questions of reciprocity. So with two people, if one person moves nearer, according to equilibrium theory, the other person should move away. But of course sometimes they don't, they also move nearer. And so under certain conditions, that is particularly when people have not yet established a stable relationship, you can get reciprocity rather than the maintenance of equilibrium. And that perhaps is part of a wider point, that the relation between two people may change in the course of the interaction.
Thus far we have dealt with nonverbal signals we receive with our eyes, but our ears also can be attuned to meanings, even if we do not understand the words. Listen to these two men discuss politics in their native Hindi. The words elude us, but beneath words there is intonation, which carries much of the emotional sense of their message. Now he is raising an objection. Now the other is making a point with great conviction. Such non-lexical accompaniments to speech as intonation and gesture are called paralinguistics. Psychologists Louise and Joel Davids asked actors to express different emotions while simply reciting the alphabet. Subjects were asked to guess which emotion was being expressed. Pride was only identified correctly 20% of the time. But the following emotion was correctly identified by 60% of the subjects.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. L, M, N, O, P, Q. R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
Recognizing that people make use of numerous nonverbal signals, Robert Rosenthal of Harvard University has devised a multi-channel test of nonverbal perception.
Each person, how sensitive they would be to face expression cues, to body cues, to tone of voice cues. And so the test now is 11 different channels of nonverbal communication. We've administered it to maybe 200 different groups in different parts of the world. One of the most outstanding, most reliable results we have is that women always seem to do better than men. And that seems to be no matter where you do it. If it's in Singapore or in New Guinea or in Australia or in the United States or Europe, women are more sensitive to nonverbal cues than men. Not only on our test, actually, but also on other tests as well. In our test, women are not only better overall, they're especially better at the negative kinds of nonverbal cues. And of course, we don't know exactly why that is. Some people have put forward the idea that women are better at negative nonverbal cues because it's had evolutionary significance for them to, in a sense, be able to survive because of negative cues in their environment.
In eye contact, the use of space, intonation, facial expression, and gesture, we have examined some elements of nonverbal communication. But we need to ask, what use do people make of it? Ray McDermott of Rockefeller University studied the way taxi drivers use nonverbal communication to decide whom to pick up.
Somebody whistling would be just a distraction to any cab driver. There's one surefire way to get a cab, to raise your hand directly above your head and hold it up. Then a driver who's seeing 10,000 things every 2 minutes can clearly distinguish the one person from everything else going on, from people crossing the street, from people looking at their watch, people touching their hair, people talking with other people. You see these Italians, they're always speaking with their hands. They're always moving their hands. You would think they need a taxi, but they don't. They're merely conversing with someone next to them. Here's a young woman. She's touching her hair. She's very attractive. She'd be a good taxi trip, but I know she's only crossing the street. You've got to see someone with the hand directly above their head. Then you know that they're responsible. They're going to be mature about it, and they know they're getting into a taxi. No, under 25. I'm very sorry, but unfortunately, they aren't very trustworthy. Here's a great guy right here with the conservative hairstyle, the suit. Looks like he's from right around here on the east side of Manhattan. He's got his attaché case, his sunglasses. It'd be a great trip out there and a big tip.
So one of the functions of nonverbal cues is that they are important instruments of self-presentation. They tell people who we are and what we are about. Nonverbal behavior need not vanish as soon as it is performed. It may be stored and analyzed in photographs, as Dr. Robert Acaret explains.
An excellent example of the nonverbal communication would be the use of photographs. A photograph, after all, it's like it's an event. It happens. It doesn't move. And one of the beauties of working with photographs is that you have them there. They're available. You can look at them. You can examine the photograph over and over again, looking for clues and looking for information that will help you in helping someone to change. Here you have a family scene. And for example, suppose I were working with either of the two sisters up here in this area that are having a relationship. And here you have this one young woman. She's intently gazing at her sister. And what's extraordinary about it, it's as if she's trying to get something out of the sister in that exchange. And you notice it's not just a visual intensity that she has as she looks at her sister. She's also a nonverbal means using her hands. For example, she has her right hand going right around the sister, and you can see the fingers up here, trying to gain her attention. But what's happening is the sister in no way is acknowledging her intense gaze or her physical presence or her effort to somehow reach her. She's like looking directly forward and sort of sealed off and not wanting any sort of relationship with the other sister. This is a early photograph of Charles Whitman, the Texas Tower killer, who climbed up on a tower and shot 34 people after first killing his wife and his mother. What's striking about the photograph is not that it predicts that here you're going to have a killer on your hands, but what's striking about the photograph is here you have a locked-in memory of that early nonverbal association of a youngster linked up with real guns, where he gets the sense that he can count on guns sort of as crutches. Now, a photograph is literally, it's like a mirror with a memory. And what's beautiful about it is that it locks in past experience, so that I can go back into the past working with someone and have like an actual event that's recorded there that you can work with.
What are some of the other uses of nonverbal behavior? Psychologists have noted that when people talk, they rarely overlap each other in conversation. How do people know when it is their turn to talk? Psychologist Adam Kendon has noted that gestures play a part in regulating turn-taking. He found that when someone who is talking relaxes a gesture, it is a signal to others that he is finished. Even if he has stopped talking but holds his gesture, it is a signal not to interrupt him. Kendon found also that eye contact, like gestures, serve to control the flow of conversation. People often look away from others for a few seconds before they finish speaking, and they look back just as they finish, signaling it is the next person's turn to speak. Nonverbal behavior has another use. It may nullify what our words say. Albert Mehrabian of UCLA points out that we sometimes deliver a pleasant set of words in an unpleasant tone.
I'm really glad you got that project. I hope you can handle it.
Better luck next year, Mark.
The tone undercuts the verbal message. Nonverbal behavior is often elusive and slippery. That is what makes it necessary to study it through careful research. Yet this same slippery quality makes it ideal for expressing things we don't want to be held accountable for. We are held accountable for our words, while the inherent ambiguity of nonverbal communication means we can more easily disown our messages. We have dealt thus far with spontaneous nonverbal behavior, but nonverbal behavior can be enshrined by society in an endlessly repeated ritual in which each gesture is meant to convey a formal meaning. Perhaps the origin of the Japanese tea ceremony was the spontaneous movements of preparing tea, but now every nuance of gesture is frozen by ritual. Which brings us to our final question. What is the origin of nonverbal behavior? Is it like the language we speak, something that is learned from the culture? Or is it a more primitive form of communication that comes from our evolutionary past? Obviously, some signals are learned, as in this tea ceremony. Yet there is increasing evidence that gestures and facial expressions are not simply learned. Charles Darwin argued that many facial expressions are deeply rooted in our evolutionary past. And more recently, Dr. Eibel Eibesfeld has collected extraordinary evidence on the inborn nature of facial expression by studying children who are born blind and deaf.
I first started my investigation with the study of the deaf and blind born, which grow up in eternal darkness and silence. And I found that these kids, deprived of quite a lot of information, still showed the basic repertoire of expressive behavior, so laughing, smiling, crying, etc., in the adequate situation, which is clear proof that quite a number of behavior patterns are pre-programmed in man. They are phylogenetic adaptations, or as we may say in a shorthand description, they are inborn.
And then Otto and Frank went to bed one night, and everything seemed all right. But when Frank woke up in the morning, he realized that he had 2 noses.
These blind children laugh, smile, cry, and stomp their feet in anger, much like sighted children. blind children would have had no opportunity to learn by visual imitation. Apparently, many facial expressions and gestures are inborn, a product of evolution. We have looked at the variety of ways people send messages without the use of words, through gestures, eye contact, the use of space, through intonation. We've considered the uses of such communication as an instrument of self-presentation, to qualify our remarks, to synchronize conversation, to express a thought or feeling we may want to take back. And we have investigated the origin of our gestures and facial expression. If some of it is learned, some fundamental expressions seem part of our biological inheritance. Psychology is beginning to understand the meaning of this language without words.